The 160th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been, there ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. Carolina has won the national championship. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You've got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and hope you all have a Happy New Year as we get closer to the end of what's been a disastrous and long and dreaded 2020 and we get ready for 2021. I'm your host, Josh Marlowe, Anthony Pagnotta joining me over the phone today. Today we're going to look at the matchup with the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, which Carolina will have to play tomorrow night in Atlanta, 8 o'clock on ACC Network Extra. And, buddy, the last time we got on here and talked a little about Carolina basketball, it wasn't a fun one as Carolina was coming off a loss at NC State in a game where they played bad enough that losing, made a lot of sense, but they still played good enough in stretches to where they could have, and in some people's mind, and mine especially, they should have won the ball game. So they're sitting here at 5-3, getting ready to go on the road to 4-3 Georgia Tech, who's got a win over Kentucky, and that's the best thing on their resume. This team has lost at home to Mercer and to Georgia State. And, we were talking back, we were getting the Ohio State game, which, of course, became the Kentucky game, how, that was kind of a must-win. Carolina, if they lose this game, they would fall to 0-2 in ACC play. Is this a must-win for Carolina tomorrow night?
It definitely feels like it. I think I don't know what if it's must-win, like if it is, season's over, but like I said when we were recapping the game against NC State, I think this game is going to show us what direction Carolina is in terms of where they're going to be ACC standings-wise. If they win this game, you would think, okay, this team is probably still a team that is among the 4 or 5 best teams in the ACC. Now, again, this year that's not saying a ton because we just frankly don't know a whole lot about the ACC teams. There have been a lot of games that have been postponed for ACC teams. There's a lot of teams that frankly don't look anywhere near what they've looked like in the past, Virginia. It's a pretty crucial game because you really get the feeling that if they lose this game, I don't know if you're staring down another season like last year. I don't know if it'll get that bad, but it starts to have the feeling of another season where you're looking and saying, okay, well, if you can't beat Georgia Tech, how many teams can you actually beat on your schedule? I mean, Georgia Tech's a team that is still really hard to get a beat on because, as you said, look at, you lose to Mercer, you lose to Georgia Southern, right? Is that Georgia?
Georgia State.
Georgia State, either way. This is not Georgia State that had Ron Hunter falling off of his leg cap wheelchair. This is a completely different team. So, but then, they come out, beat Kentucky. I forget who their other win is. That was another win where people did not expect them to win the game. So, it's so tough to get a read on the team that you're facing. But, yeah, it kind of feels like one of those games where if you're expecting this Carolina team to take a step forward from where they were last year, to get back to being one of those teams that is going to compete for an ACC regular season title, which is kind of where we felt this team could be at the start of the year. This is a game that they have to win. But again, this is a task that's easier said than done. I know that, you're definitely a guy that you're a Josh Pastner guy in terms of what he can do on the court. Some of the other stuff off the court, but nobody, of course, really is going to have a good opinion on that. But, in terms of what he's done on the court at Georgia Tech, he's a guy that's had some pretty decent success. Last year, came into Chapel Hill, found a way to get them out to was it one of, or was it the best start that any team has ever had as a football? I mean, they were up, 30-6?
Yeah, 30-6, yeah.
Of course, the first time that I went to the Smith Center to watch a game, that was what I got to witness in front of me. I don't think it's quite going to be like that in this one, but Carolina's got to come prepared for a test in this one, because this is a Georgia Tech team that still has some talent, including some guys that hurt Carolina last year.
Yeah, I mean, we were mentioning about, if Carolina can't beat Georgia Tech, where do you go from there? That was the problem, as we referenced last year, was, they lost to teams that they're not supposed to lose to. I don't look at the loss at NC State as a loss. I don't look at it as a bad loss, because it's a rivalry game in a unique environment with COVID-19. State's played us a lot tougher since Kevin Keatts has taken over that program than Mark Gottfried or Sidney Lowe when they were coaching the Wolfpack. So, to me, that wasn't a bad loss. They lose to Georgia Tech. That's a bad loss. This team, has home losses to Mercer and Georgia State. You beat Kentucky, but Kentucky's 1-6. They haven't been 1-6 since 1926 or something like that. So Kentucky is having a really down year. You won at Nebraska, but Nebraska's still trying to figure out who they are under Fred Hoiberg. Georgia Tech as a team right now constructed isn't good. On paper, they've got really good numbers. They put 5 guys in double figures. They score 82 points per game, but they give up 77 points per game. They've had some, they've had some issues defensively. Moses Wright's their leading scorer at 19.6. Jose Alvarado, who's a guy who just killed Carolina last year in Chapel Hill, averages 16.9. So, they've got some individual pieces that can beat the Tar Heels. So, as we talk about Carolina, and as it happens in most of the games that Carolina plays, it's all about how does Carolina play normally to impact whether they're going to win or lose the ball game. Last time I saw against NC State, they turned the ball over a lot, took a lot of bad shots. There's been a lot of criticism of Caleb Love, and that's the thing that he's got to be, about him. He's got to get better. He's got to start improving sooner rather than later. He posted a video on his Twitter on Christmas Eve of him in the gym working on his game. That's an positive and encouraging side that, he's home for the holidays, but he got his guys butt in the gym. He's working on his shot because Carolina needs him to be better. And it needs to happen, starting tomorrow night. If this team is going to take the next step, if they're going to round into the type of team that I think they can be, which is a top 3 team in the ACC and a top 10 to 15 team nationally. The good news is that if they still continue to struggle to shoot the ball from the outside, you've got a plethora of bigs that you can put the ball inside to that should have their way against Georgia Tech, who's a little bit more of a smaller team. If you remember that game last year, even though Carolina got down 30-6, that was Garrison Brooks' coming out party, where he literally just put the team on his back and willed them to make it competitive in the second half. About said willed themselves to victory. They didn't come back to win the ball game. So I think, as we've said, every time we've gone on here and talked about Carolina basketball, that's where you've got to start, is inside. But it's not just Garrison Brooks. Armando Bacot is the leading scorer of the rotation of bigs, averaging 12 points per game and 8 rebounds. Then you got the guys coming off the bench, Day'Ron Sharpe, 8.7 rebounds. Walker Kessler, only 3 points and 3 rebounds per game. But that NC State game, he provided a lot of energy and a really big lift for the Tar Heels as they clawed back into that game. So what are you going to be looking for as we sit down and watch this game tomorrow night?
Well, Armando Bacot is definitely one. First of all, would you have believed me if I would have told you in the preseason that he would be the leading scorer out of those 4 bigs? To be honest with you, I think that a lot of people probably would have put him last on the list in terms of who would be the leading scorer out of the 4 guys. He has really stepped his game up. But, that feels like that's going to be where this game will be won again. Because, this team is built similarly to the team that played Carolina in the Smith Center last year. Garrison Brooks pretty much was the only reason that Carolina got themselves back into that game. nobody else in that game played well. Remember, there was a point in that game where Robbie O'Han came in to try to motivate anybody on the team. Like, Garrison Brooks was playing fine. Nobody else on the team could hold on to the basketball. They couldn't hit any sort of shot. I mean, it was one of the worst performances that I've ever seen from a basketball team ever. And I've seen, some high school teams play that have been really, really bad. That was rough to start. I don't think that we're going to have to worry about that in this game. You look at the team that's given up 77 points per game, so you feel like if there's a game where maybe Carolina can get on track, shooting the basketball a little bit, it could be in this game. This could be a game where you're going to get some open looks, and you've got to be able to knock them down. But, yeah, the game is going to be won on the inside. You know that you're going to have the strength there. They don't have a guy like Ben Lammers, who they had a couple of years ago, who was a very talented big, gave you some problems when we played him. They don't have that guy. This team is going to work. Alvarado's the best player. It's very clear. So Carolina needs to be able to score. But the other big thing that I'm going to be watching in this game, and you mentioned Caleb Love, and it's really him and R.J. Davis in this game. I'm going to be interested to watch them on the defensive end. The last time that we saw them, NC State was a dribble drive, was able to drive the lane extremely easily, which not only led to mid-range jump shots, floaters, sometimes even just breathing everybody going straight to the basket for easy finishes. It led to a lot of kick-out threes. Carolina's got to be able to avoid the dribble drive from killing them the way that it did in that game against NC State, and in the way it did at times in games last year. Because if they do that again, it's going to open up outside shots. And as you said, this Georgia Tech team can score. Their problem isn't that they are not that they can't put the ball in the hoop. They can't stop anybody. So Carolina's got to be able to find a way to prevent them from getting the types of open looks that NC State, not even NC State just by themselves, but also Iowa early in the year.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to take those away, or else it could be a long time.
You bring up a really good point in how Carolina has struggled at times containing the dribble. And I think a lot of that's expected because you've got two young guys playing on the perimeter. I've been surprised that we haven't seen Roy Williams get more into a zone look at times of year just to try to help his guys out. That may be an option if they continue to struggle, because that's going to, as you mentioned, Georgia Tech, they're built to score the ball with their guards, whether it's put the ball on the floor and drive the basket or drive and kick it and shoot the three-point shot, which Carolina, we all know the troubles they've had guarding the three really since the time we've all been watching Carolina basketball. It's been something that's really killed this program. And so I think, that's the thing with Carolina with their guard play. It's twofold. I think we harp on them so much on the offensive end. Now, look, they weren't good at NC State. They know that. The coaches know that. Us fans know that. But as it often happens, when you don't play good on one and it affects your play on the other, and that's where they've got to get back to leveling out the play. Earlier in the year, look at what they did in Maui. They weren't very good offensively. They won those games that they won with the play of the interior, but they were playing harder defensively. They were trying, they were, just not allowing themselves to get beat as much. They've got to get back to that, because I think Carolina can be a really, really good defensive team if they commit to being a good defensive team. Defensive play is all about 1-2 and effort. Their effort's got to get better. Their 1-2's got to get better. It's got to exceed the 1-2s and the efforts of these teams are going to play, because Carolina may have more talent. But as we all know in this conference, experience will beat talent 9 times out of 10 in the ACC. Georgia Tech's going to start 4 seniors tomorrow night and a junior. Like, they've got dudes that have been around this league for a while. They know how to play in the ACC. And a lot like Georgia Tech, or not a lot like say, this game isn't a rivalry game, but this game means more to Georgia Tech than it means to Carolina, because that means Josh Pastner can have 2 wins on his resume against Roy Williams. You get a home win, against Carolina. Albeit there won't be any fans, but you can put that on your resume and you can patch up on the back for Georgia Tech and say, hey, look, we accomplished something this season. So that's something they're going to have to find themselves as they get in all these games. They got to put themselves to motivate, because you're not always going to play against top 25 opponents. You're not playing Duke every night. Some of these games where you're playing Clemson or Georgia Tech or Pittsburgh, these games mean more to that opponent than they mean to you. And as a young team like Carolina is, you got to find a way to get yourself up for those games as you get up for the big time games that'll come on later in the season. So with that, look, Carolina's had a whole week off. I think they benefited from having a week off. I think it helped the coaching staff to kind of take a deep breath, kind of evaluate where they're at. I imagine there'll be some changes tomorrow. You're in ACC play, you'll see a tighter rotation. So as we get ready to pick the game, if I mentioned something that Carolina maybe should experience